58-2 Sylphie. Third Pav. Capella Emerata Lugunika's eyes went vacant, utterly devoid of life, as her soul was completely obliterated, leaving behind nothing but a hollow corpse. With her lifeless body cradled in his arms, Subaru turned and made his way back to the mansion. He landed with a heavy thud before Elsa, his expression unreadable. Mama, Elsa uttered, her voice trembling in complete disbelief. Her knees buckled beneath her, and she collapsed to the floor, her entire body giving out. In that single moment, she was no longer the infamous Bowel Hunter. She was someone who had lost both the battle and the war, utterly so. Aqua swiftly casted water magic to bind Elsa in place. But Elsa didn't resist, not in the slightest. She just sat there, bound and broken. You gave up easily, Subaru commented, his voice calm but laced with a hint of cold amusement. You killed her, what do you think I can do to you now? Elsa replied in a hollow, defeated tone. Her words, as simple as they were, made perfect sense. She had no illusions about her position. Why hadn't she tried to escape? The reasons were twofold. Perhaps her years of immortality had dulled her instincts and eroded her will. Or perhaps, deep down, she understood how futile it would be to even attempt escape from someone like him. What are you waiting for? She asked, closing her eyes. Just kill me already and be done with it. You want to die? Subaru repeated, raising an eyebrow as a cold smile slowly crept across his face. That's the easy way out. Then, his tone shifted, darker and heavier with intent. Make a contract with me, give me your loyalty, your soul, your body, and your mind. That will be your punishment. At those words, Elsa's eyes snapped open. She looked at him, shocked but defiant. I won't make a contract. Just kill me, she replied, her voice steady despite the pain. She knew full well that Subaru was capable of ending her. Capella's black flames had once nearly killed her, and even her regeneration couldn't have saved her then. Subaru's smile widened further, his expression growing more twisted as he slowly reached out and grabbed her by the throat. With a single motion, he lifted her off the ground, his grip unrelenting as he began to choke her. Fine, he said coldly. I offered you a chance. But since you want to die so badly, I'll make sure it's the most painful death you could ever imagine. His voice had become a chilling whisper, and his eyes gleamed with a merciless fury. He had died at Elsa's hands several times. And though this Elsa was not the exact one who had murdered him repeatedly, the memories of those brutal deaths were still seared into his mind. He had offered her a sliver of mercy, not out of pity, but because this version of Elsa hadn't been the one to harm him. And beyond that, if she could be turned, her strength would be an asset to Amelia's camp. Strategically, it made sense. Subaru and Reina were strong, yes, but they were not omnipresent. He knew the value of reinforcements. But she had refused. And now, she would suffer for it. His grip tightened. A sharp crack echoed through the hall as her trachea fractured under the pressure. Elsa coughed violently, blood spewing from her mouth as she choked on it. Her face began to turn a deep shade of blue, agony etched into every feature. Her eyes rolled back as tears streamed uncontrollably from them. She writhed and struggled, desperate to break free, but it was hopeless. Death did not come for her, and her body's regeneration, usually so swift, was too slow now to counteract the damage in real time. She was trapped, unable to die, unable to recover. It was pure agony. It was unending torture. GGHHK. Ag. She tried to speak, barely forming words through the pain and pressure. Subaru kept his grip on her neck for several agonizing minutes, even going so far as to forcibly use his mind manipulation ability to keep her conscious and repeatedly amplify her pain. As long as a person retained even a shred of humanity, no matter how twisted, it was inevitable they would yield to such torture. And so did Elsa. When Subaru realized she had reached her breaking point, he finally released her, letting her fall unceremoniously to the floor. She crumpled, gasping and choking, blood pouring from her mouth as she vomited onto the stone beneath her. Her chest heaved violently as she drew in shallow, ragged breaths. Slowly, painfully, her trachea began to mend. Her body struggled to restore itself, inch by inch. Air finally returned to her lungs. Oh, were you trying to say something? Subaru asked with mock curiosity, looking down at her as if nothing had happened. And then, Elsa cried. Tears fell freely down her blood-streaked face. She sobbed, not in rage, not in hatred, but in despair, and in pain. Subaru fell silent at the sight, his expression unreadable. Elsa trembled as she reached out and clutched his feet, her sobs shaking her entire body. I accept. Please. Just don't torture me again. Elsa cried out in desperation, her voice trembling as she begged for mercy, her pride completely shattered. Meanwhile, Frederica stood to the side, watching the harrowing scene unfold with wide, horrified eyes. She had witnessed every excruciating moment, every groan of pain, every twitch of helplessness, and every flicker of torment in Elsa's expression. The raw suffering etched into that moment shook her to her very core. I'm truly glad that Lord Zero isn't our enemy, she thought, a shiver running down her spine. Just the thought of someone like Subaru turning his wrath against them sent a deep chill through her entire being. If he had stood as their adversary, she could only imagine the utter devastation he could have wrought. No one would have been able to stop him. In stark contrast, the other women nearby looked at Subaru with a completely different kind of awe in their eyes. Stars sparkled in their gazes as they stared at him, their expressions practically glowing with admiration. To them, Subaru wasn't just powerful, he was a living legend and hero to them. A Giga Chad, as some would say in less formal tones. Ayu. Chill, ladies. Not long after her surrender, Elsa solemnly made the contract with Subaru, binding her soul, body, and mind to his will. She had become his servant, his subordinate, whether by choice or sheer necessity. Yet, even after the contract had been completed, a terrifying realization slowly crept into her mind. Even now, even with the contract in place, Subaru still had the power to torture her. There was nothing in the terms that prevented him from doing so. She had no leverage, no escape. In the end, she could only hope that her new master would show mercy, that he might choose benevolence over cruelty. As the contract settled and the pact solidified, Subaru suddenly felt a strange shift within himself. A surge of power, unfamiliar yet undeniable, stirred in the depths of his being. The witch factor of lust has finished merging with his being, it took a lot longer than others for some reason. A new authority had awakened within him. He now held the authority of lust, not just Capella's version, but his own personalized form of it, integrated with the witch factor now embedded in his soul. How magnificent, came the voice of Echidna, the witch of greed, echoing inside his mind. Her tone was laced with intrigue and amusement. To take an enemy and forge them into an ally through sheer will and brutal force, such a deliciously greedy path you've chosen, Subaru. Truly entertaining. Then, with a chuckle, she added, why don't you explore this new authority of lust? I highly doubt it's as simple as it appears on the surface. I'll test it soon enough, on the Great Rabbit, Subaru responded mentally. Turning his attention back to Elsa, he issued his first command with the commanding presence of a true master. Elsa, he said firmly, your first order, protect Frederica and everyone else in this mansion from any and all threats that may arise during my absence. Elsa, still kneeling, nodded in acknowledgement. Understood. I will do so, she replied in a low voice. Though her hands itched to spill blood, as was her nature, especially when it came to demi-humans like Frederica, she clenched her fists and held herself back. She understood all too well. If she lost control and gave in to her old urges, Subaru would make her existence a living nightmare. She did not want to taste that suffering again. Subaru then turned toward Frederica, his expression softening ever so slightly. Frederica, the problems back at the sanctuary haven't been resolved yet, he said. Once I've settled things there, I'll return with the others. Frederica bowed her head respectfully. Understood, Lord Zero. Please rest assured, I shall take care of the mansion in both your absence and Master Roswaal's, she replied, her tone composed and resolute. Subaru then turned to face Sylphie and the other liberated women gathered nearby. His gaze softened further as he addressed them. And all of you, have you managed to settle in properly? Please bear with the situation for just a few more days. Once things are stable, I'll personally make sure to build proper homes for each and every one of you. One of the women stepped forward, her expression filled with gratitude. Lord Zero, we are truly grateful for everything you've done for us. Please don't worry, we've already adjusted to the space, and there's been more than enough room for us all. Yes, Lord Subaru, you don't need to worry about us at all, Sylphie added with a smile. Subaru gave a tired sigh, his gaze briefly flicking toward Sylphie. Having two people with the same name, his spirit Sylphie, and this freed woman Sylphie, was bound to lead to confusion down the line. Whatever, he thought to himself. I'm not changing my spirit's name, and I obviously can't ask the other Sylphie to change hers either. I'll just have to live with it. With that, Subaru gathered Beatrice, Gloria, and Aqua, those closest to him, and teleported, leaving the mansion behind as he made his return to the sanctuary to confront the lingering problems still awaiting him there. To be continued. 26 comments 0 vote. 59 IAM 0. Third POV. Meanwhile, after Subaru departed from the sanctuary, Roswaal wasted no time putting his elaborate and malicious plans into motion. The first step in his scheme was to invite Garfield for a private discussion under the pretense of sharing critical information. With a masterful deception, Roswaal began spinning a convincing lie, painting Zero as a sinister enemy, a witch cultist of the highest order. Not only that, but he accused Zero of holding the terrifying position of Sin Archbishop, instilling immediate suspicion and hostility. He's not just any cultist, Roswaal said with a grave, slow tone, he's an archbishop, one of the worst kinds. He's come to annihilate everything. Garfield's expression twisted with fury as he clenched his fists tightly, veins bulging under the pressure. Damn it. I knew something was off when Grandma Ryazu said he reeked of a witch cultist. Garfield growled, clenching his fists tightly. Roswaal, speaking with a dramatic flair and a hidden smirk, continued to weave lies without hesitation. Unfortunately, the evil sword saint is always by his side, so I couldn't move freely until now. WWW, his words dripped with falsehood, carefully crafted to manipulate. In fact, labeling the sword saint as evil was a stretch by any measure, but unfortunately, the blonde beastman wasn't exactly known for his intelligence. To make matters worse, Subaru's previous headbutt seemed to have knocked out whatever little common sense he had left. This guy can literally become the idiocy cosmic god in Marvel. But do not fret, Garfield, Roswaal added, his voice slowing into an eerie, melodic drawl. Their presence has unwittingly drawn in the Griat rabbit, and so now the opportunity arises. All the blame can fall on Zero, so while the Sword Saint is preoccupied with dealing with that monstrosity, Yo must strike and destroy them. The flames of hatred ignited in Garfield's eyes, his body trembling with rage. He was now more than convinced that he needed to eliminate what he believed to be a grave threat, witch cultists who had infiltrated his home. Roswaal's manipulation had worked flawlessly. Inwardly, Roswaal chuckled. His mind danced with satisfaction, his plan unfolding step by step. The strategy was beautifully chaotic. He would keep everyone occupied. With the Sin Archbishop of Lust and Elsa launching a brutal assault on the mansion, and with the Great Rabbit now running rampant in the sanctuary. Garfield, filled with righteous anger, would unknowingly help orchestrate the chaos. Roswaal's intentions were far darker than anyone realized. He had no qualms about eliminating Rem and Ram, treating them as mere pawns in his larger game. The ultimate goal was clear, to break Subaru's spirit completely. He wanted Subaru to reach such a point of despair and helplessness, that in a future loop, the boy would have no choice but to make a binding contract with him. A contract to do whatever it takes, even if it meant sacrificing his soul, to crown Amelia as queen. Yes, Amelia's position in the royal selection had improved significantly. With Subaru's heroic feats, defeating the White Whale and slaying multiple Sin Archbishops, the public would soon regard him as a legend. News of his accomplishments should be beginning to spread among the populace. But unfortunately, achievements alone were not enough. If Amelia belonged to any other race, their side would already be celebrating a landslide victory. Yet, she bore the burden of her lineage, being a half-elf, a painful reminder to the world of the Witch of Envy. The prejudice was deep-rooted. No matter her strength or intentions, many refused to accept her as the rightful ruler. Winning the throne wouldn't be simple. And so the pieces moved. The plan unfolded. As Garfield stormed off to confront Amelia, determined to purge the false cultists, the Great Rabbit, a magical calamity, was unleashed to keep Reina occupied. The stage was set for madness and bloodshed. Soon, Roswaal would have Subaru wrapped around his finger. Or so he thought. Subaru returned to the sanctuary alongside his three spirits, but almost immediately, he felt something was off. A chill crept through his spine, and he instinctively closed his eyes, expanding his senses outward. Then he felt it. The Great Rabbit, it's here. Subaru's expression hardened as he sensed thousands, no, tens of thousands, of sinister, pulsating auras converging at one point. Without hesitation, he teleported to the source of the menace. What he saw sent a jolt through his chest. Reina stood defiantly, her sword still sheathed, yet wreaking utter devastation. With each powerful swing, she carved the monstrous great rabbits into grotesque chunks, their blood spraying into the air like crimson mist. The ground was littered with mangled bodies, but the horror had only just begun. Despite Reina's overwhelming strength, the great rabbits were recovering at a terrifying pace. Worse still, their numbers seemed to double the more she slaughtered them. It was an endless tide of death. Floating beside Subaru, Echidna's soul shimmered with amusement and curiosity as she observed the chaos. Her calm, analytical demeanor stood in stark contrast to the slaughter below. Oh my, she murmured with a wicked smirk, it seems she's activated the full potential of the Great Rabbit. Subaru turned to her, eyes narrowed in confusion. Full potential? What are you talking about? Echidna's voice took on a more instructive tone, as if she were giving a lecture rather than watching a battle. Each of the great beasts has a hidden trait. If they suffer tremendous damage over a short period of time, they don't just become harder to kill, they adapt. The best strategy is to drain them of their mana and vitality, then strike with a single, final blow. The realization dawned on Subaru like a flash of lightning. So that's why the white whale had been so impossibly difficult to defeat. Why don't you experiment a little? Echidna asked with a greedy gleam in her eye. I've always been curious about the authority of lust. You tend to acquire fascinating abilities after all. Indeed, Subaru's powers had grown immensely, frighteningly so. Between the authority of envy, which had granted him the cruel gift of return by death, and the authorities of greed and sloth, he had gained abilities that transcended human limits. His shadow hands could phase through matter, while his greed can replicate others' skills, even the authorities themselves. Driven by urgency and curiosity alike, Subaru didn't hesitate. He activated his authority of lust. In an instant, the world around him changed. His vision shifted into a kaleidoscope of vibrant color and dark intent. The aura surrounding the great rabbits burned a deep, violent red. And then, a sensation welled up from within him. An overwhelming urge to kill. Die. The word echoed through Subaru's mind like the toll of a divine bell, sharp and absolute. As soon as the thought crystallized in his mind, his authority of lust surged forth. In an instant, all of the great rabbits within his line of focus abruptly halted, as though some unseen puppeteer had severed the strings that held them aloft. The eerie stillness that followed was unnatural, an abrupt end to a frenzied storm of violence. Then, without warning, their bodies collapsed in unison. A sickening thud echoed across the battlefield as hundreds, no, thousands, of the monstrous creatures fell lifeless to the blood-stained ground, their grotesque eyes frozen in a final moment of madness. My liege. Reina's voice rang out through the smoky air, filled with a mixture of awe and reverence. She had instantly noticed the sudden collapse of a massive portion of the white rabbit swarm. Her sharp instincts led her gaze straight to Subaru, the source of the miracle. Without hesitation, she teleported to his side, reappearing with a graceful burst of wind. Dropping to one knee, she bowed deeply in respect. Lord Zero, she addressed him formally, her voice tinged with both pride and frustration, I have been holding the great rabbits at bay. But the more I slay, the more they spawn, and each time, they return in even greater numbers. Her frustration was palpable. Reina, the sword saint, was a being of unparalleled strength. But now, she found herself in an infuriating stalemate. Her power was tremendous, perhaps even beyond comprehension, but only when her sword, Reed, deemed an enemy worthy could it be unsheathed. In that state, Reina was invincible. She could vanquish almost any foe with a single, decisive stroke. But therein lay the problem. There existed loopholes in the criteria that dictated Reed's awakening. Against opponents with broken, reality-defying abilities, like Regulus Corneas, whose authority made him untouchable, or the Great Rabbit, which functioned in a strange metaphysical limbo, Reed refused to acknowledge them as individuals worthy of battle. The Great Rabbit, specifically, was an anomaly. It was a paradoxical existence, simultaneously a collective of separate creatures and a single entity with a shared consciousness. Neither fully one individual nor multiple beings with distinct minds. This confusing nature made it fall through the cracks of Reed's perception. And so, the sword remained dormant, sheathed, silent. Because of this, Reina could not finish them with one stroke. She was forced into a repetitive cycle, slaying the beasts only for them to multiply in grotesque excess. Every death brought more life. A twisted reproduction fueled by violence. It was an endless loop. A gruesome draw. And to Reina, a being who prided herself on unshakable dominance in battle, the realization filled her with shame. You're unable to draw Reed, aren't you? Subaru asked quietly, watching her bowed form with understanding rather than judgment. As if summoned by his presence, the three spirits, Beatrice, Gloria, and Aqua, materialized outside of his body, surrounding him. Reina lowered her head further in acknowledgement. Yes, they defy my judgment. They counter my abilities. She could, in theory, fight them forever. Her stamina, regeneration, and skills were godlike. But ultimate victory came at a catastrophic cost. If she were to unleash her full power indiscriminately, the result would be nothing less than the destruction of the entire world. HMPH. If we could trap those abominations in another dimension or toss them off the great waterfall, we could rid ourselves of them permanently, I suppose, Beatrice said sharply, floating slightly above the ground, her small arms crossed defiantly. Her twintails bobbed with each word. Then she added with unmistakable pride, "But worry not. Betty's contractor need not trouble himself too much. Betty can contain them. I shall open a separate dimension to trap those pests inside." Father, Gloria interjected passionately, stepping forward while glowing in burning determination. This humble concubine can obliterate them in one strike with Al-Jiwald, provided they are cornered and have nowhere to escape. You two are still bickering like children, Aqua said with a light laugh, amused by their rivalry. Subaru raised a hand, commanding their attention. No need for infighting. His voice was clear, authoritative, and commanding. Reina, I need you to help herd them together into one concentrated space. But don't kill them too quickly, it will only accelerate their replication. Control them. Stall them. Beatrice, use Minya to create a containment barrier to trap them. I want them cornered with no way to escape. Aqua, Gloria, both of you support Beatrice with your magic, focus on keeping the formation intact. There was no hesitation, no argument. They moved as one, subordinates answering the call of their king. Reina nodded sharply and vanished in a flash of wind, diving headlong into the heart of the monstrous horde. With fluid, precise movements, she began corralling the rabbits, skillfully pushing them toward the trap zone. Beatrice ascended high into the air, her hair whipping in the rising winds. She unleashed glowing mana projectiles that hovered, then exploded into crystalline formations to form the boundaries of the trap. Gloria, though grudgingly, helped her with Aqua. A beautiful, chaotic symphony of light and elemental energy filled the battlefield. In the midst of it all, Echidna floated just above Subaru's shoulder, watching the scene unfold. For once, her voice lacked its usual condescension or amusement. Her expression was serious. You've come to understand your power, and I can see exactly what you're planning, Echidna said, her tone grave. She narrowed her eyes, almost in reluctant admiration. There's no doubt, your authority of lust is truly the ability to kill anything I focus on, it's death manipulation, Subaru finished Echidna's sentence, his voice calm but resolute. Echidna laughed softly, a thrill running through her. Do you even realize how powerful that is? If it can bypass resurrection and immortality, then nothing is beyond your reach. You can kill anything. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with sheer excitement. Meanwhile, Subaru slowly began to lift off the ground, his body rising weightlessly into the air as if the laws of gravity no longer applied to him. Below, the great rabbits were being tightly corralled, the trap nearly complete. Reina, get out of there. They're all trapped now. Beatrice, Gloria, Aqua, stop firing your spells, Subaru commanded telepathically, his voice ringing clear in their minds. Reina vanished from the swarm in a flash, teleporting to safety without hesitation. The three spirits immediately halted their magical assault, allowing silence to fall over the battlefield. Subaru simultaneously unleashed his aura and psychic abilities, locking onto every single cursed great rabbit within the line of sight of his aura and psychic perception. A moment passed. Then, IAM. 0. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Every single great rabbit froze mid-motion, as if time had stopped for them. Then, one by one, they collapsed to the ground, lifeless, stripped of all vitality in an instant. It was utter annihilation. A complete area of effect instant death ability, one that could not be dodged, countered, or nullified. Too powerful. Too overwhelming. A broken ability, transcending logic and natural law. As expected of a Sin authority, it operated outside the boundaries set by Ad Laguna, the divine system that governed the world itself. Subaru gently descended back to the earth, the dust swirling around his feet. Reina stood nearby, visibly shaken by the spectacle she had just witnessed. She had been locked in an endless struggle with those beasts, forced into a stalemate. Yet Subaru had wiped them out in a single breath, with no effort, no sword, and no blood spilled on his hands. What sort of power was that? I suppose, Beatrice asked, her eyes gleaming as she looked up at him with awe and curiosity. It's the authority of lust, Subaru answered honestly, his voice composed. It awakened within me after I acquired the lust factor by killing Capella. As expected of my contractor. I suppose, Beatrice declared with amazement, pride brimming in her voice. Indeed, as expected of my lord, Reina said softly, her lips curling into a gentle smile. Her respect for him deepened. Her admiration grew. But more than anything, her love for him intensified. She was truly happy. Her liege had become so powerful, so untouchable. With strength like this, he could protect himself. He would be safe, even without her. But even if he were to be endangered again, it didn't matter. Because if it came to that, she would simply lock him away somewhere safe, where only she could see him, only she could reach him. Ayu, chill Reina. Reina smiled to herself. Yandere eyes. To be continued. A.N. I have decided to give a random fact and a related knowledge to the chapter that you might have missed. Let's see if I can follow this every chap. In Hinduism, Brahma is the god of creation. He created both man and woman, gods and demons. He grew so arrogant that he thought as he was the creator, every living being must bow to him, every living being must submit to him to the god. To cure his arrogance and pride, Lord Shiva, the destroyer of the worlds, tried to persuade him gently. But after being angered by Brahma, he pulled out his trident and chopped out one of his heads to punish him. Just things severed by Lord Shiva's Trishula cannot be healed. Yeah, so don't grow arrogant due to your position and power, while everyone should give the respect you deserve for your deeds, never cloud it your mind. Next, Subaru authority for who still haven't guessed is life and death manipulation. While I cannot tell whether it can negate resurrection or not, but it can kill anything in Ray 0. Even Reina isn't immune to its abilities. Okay, that's all. 19 comments 0 vote.